Welcome to the Equity.Guru Investor Roundtable. What a distinguished young group of men we have here today. Myself, Rob Simpson, Chris Perry. Where is Chris Perry? He was missing a few minutes. Oh, there he is. Galen, and of course, Vishal Vatura, who's our chart attack man. Today, we're talking about Filament Health, and we've been kicking them around the old guru lately. They've talked to our pals Jody Vance and Maddie Grace and talked about their business, Ben Lightburn. This is all about natural psychedelics, not synthetic, not put together in a laboratory. It comes from nature, and it is FH on the NEO exchange in Canada. And I believe, Chris Perry, are you going to mention these guys first?
Yeah, sure. Why not? So Filament is a psychedelics company, and before everyone sets their hair on fire and runs around panicking, there are a lot of those, and some are psychedelics in fact, and some are psychedelics in theory. There are companies that say one day we will have a license and we will do many things, and there are other companies that say we actually have a license to do some of those things. Filament is one of the latter. They have a dealer's license in Canada, which allows them to do research and possess and propagate narcotics, essentially, things that would otherwise be illegal. So, long story short, on the psychedelics, why they're important is because there are compounds within the psychedelics that open the mind, allow you to do a little bit of work on yourself, allow you to strip away your ego and your natural defenses, figure out what's wrong with you, and start working on fixes. That's the TLDR version of it. Something that I've stumbled through on an amateur basis most recently and found to be very, very, very helpful in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of companies that are taking that opportunity as a sort of a backdoor into an eventual ability to recreational sell mushrooms and psilocybin and other things that will just get you shit-faced on a Friday night and have a great old experience with the drum circle on Third Beach. Mushrooms and psychedelics right now are where cannabis was in like 2014, in that there are a lot of companies that are trying to get into the space or telling you they're in the space, or even in a small part are in the space. And Filament is one of those that are in a small part are in the space. And I say that only because a lot of rules and regulations have to change in order to get from where they can be right now, which is talking about patients and psychological health, and where ultimately pretty much every psychedelics company wants to be, and that is down the road selling you edibles and pills and stuff that will let you kick back on a weekend in the hot tub and have a grand old time of it. No one's allowed to say that right now because it's just about the patient, but that's where we were with cannabis in 2014. Everyone was talking about, records is no big deal. We're all about the patients. And then the moment the switch was flipped, no one really cared about the patients anymore. So what is interesting about Filament Health is that they are bucking the trend, which is let's skirt around those regulatory limitations by creating synthetic psychedelic elements, right? So things that can get straight to helping you psychologically right now, but within the laws. What these guys are doing is saying, look, there's no better opportunity than the natural psychedelics. As nature intended, a whole lot of good stuff happens. And if you create a synthetic version of that, you're not getting the full entourage effect. Similar to what we saw with cannabis in the early days, right? A lot of synthetic cannabis companies fell by the wayside when cannabis just completely opened up. So these guys, they're on the right side of God right now. They're on the right side of the law right now. And quite frankly, their chart is on the right side of value right now.
What are we digging, Galen? I know you're excited.
Yeah, well, I always am. It's a permanent state. Look, I've probably dropped more acid than Leary, and smoked more marijuana than Tommy Chong, and done more mushrooms than the Grateful Dead attendee. But I'm straight edge now, so I get to see this from both sides of the fence. Basically, I really do believe in the process of actually using psychedelics as a medicinal aid and a therapeutic aid, because versus your traditional treatments, which were more or less emotional suppressants. What psilocybin and DMT and MDMA afford you the opportunity of is actually rewiring your brain. The brain is a neural network that basically is a self-assembling mechanism, and it's the patterns we produce throughout our life that cause us to do whatever we do. And treatment-resistant depression or major depression disorders are incredibly difficult to deal with because they are entrenched in the brain chemistry and in how you think. And what mushrooms and these other types of psychedelics allow you to do is step outside that framework and actually physically rewire the circuits. And in doing this with companioned with a proper therapeutic assistance, where somebody's actually guiding you through, like a medicine man of some sort, this is the way that we can actually really get some great results that are long-term and fairly effective fairly quickly. The success rates are pretty phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, this has to be, as I said, coupled with therapy, and there's ongoing cognitive behavioral therapy that needs to take place because you have to change how you act and how your patterns work. But this gives you an insight rather than taking, well, let's say an opioid, which basically sits you on an alleyway begging for change, right? So this has a tremendous potential. Now, as Chris said, we are in the cannabis 1.0 phase of this particular industry. Everybody and anybody is saying they got a piece of the action and want you to jump on the train. We're really not in a place yet where we can actively determine how this is going to sit or play out. We're waiting for legislation to happen on both sides of the fence. In the United States, on a state-by-state level. In Canada, we've got some exemptions that are out. But as with the MMPR licenses that Health Canada was putting out in the initial push for cannabis, there's a lot of bureaucracy, and a lot of these applications for exemptions are sitting on somebody's desk. Now, to get ahead, we need to push ahead legislation. We have to have a bit of a cultural change where people look at these things, because basically Timothy Leary destroyed medical research of LSD because he demanded that everybody tune in, turn on, and drop out. And the establishment didn't want that in any way, shape, or form, so immediately made the government, or made the drug a Schedule I drug, and you couldn't even look at it without getting arrested. So we have to look at it now as that these are medicinal. Now, Chris has a firm belief that this will turn into a recreational market. I don't really have that kind of faith. Smoking pot is one thing. As somebody who is very, very well positioned within the market and knows a lot about the industry says, pot's like driving a Volkswagen, where psychedelics are like running through a Ferrari. It's a bit of a different experience and a bit of a different potential for reaction and affecting how you are and who you are. And taking it wrong and badly can really set things on edge. So it may not be a recreational market, but very much it will be a medicinal market. And Filament Health, as Chris has already mentioned, is taking a very unique process to doing this by actually patenting, there we go, maybe if I can say that, the natural extraction of psilocybin, and actually having a first patent of a public company for that extraction. So that kind of pushes ahead of the pack. Again, talking about the entourage effects, my only argument against that is that when you put too many players in the game, it's really hard to understand what the cumulative effect will be down the line. So that's going to be something difficult for them to determine. But what they've got going on is that they've got the extraction happening. They're going to have formulations, which they've already got, I believe, 3 or 4 on the go. One of them is already in phase 2 clinical studies.
Put me in those studies.
See, there you go. See, I really do have a firm belief that these are actually the new psychotherapeutic world that we're entering, and they really do have a place and an effective nature. So I'm all behind it. I think filament is very interesting in its natural extraction. As I said, one argument would be that it is can't gauge the cumulative effects, I think, as accurately as a lab-produced singular molecule. But the other thing also to argue for or against, and it's not necessarily a big thing, but it's something to consider, is that there's many traditional uses of these drugs. And by like ibogaine and other types of things, you start scooping that up on a grand scale, then the people that use them medicinally in areas that have used them for thousands of years no longer have access to them. That's my one argument. Other than that, I think Filament Health is a very interesting prospect, and I'd like to see where they go.
I'm sorry. Did you say something about you were excited? I couldn't tell if you were
huge, bumbling, or just bumping around here.
By the way, I think you also referred to controlled potency. And
Yes.
that's the one thing about synthetic is the potency can be more readily controlled.
But Filament is developing a process to allow
Correct.
that dosage to be accurate.
Right, correct.
But you can overdose on donuts, you know, like you can overdose on anything.
No, you can't. I love it.
Avocado.
I managed to get that type too.
Hold on. Before we go back,
I know we don't want to blow over time, but you know, I think microdosing is really the thing where this whole industry is going to be at.
Yeah.
And you know, if you took something that's good for you in small doses and you decided to blow it out on a weekend, you're going to have a negative effect on pretty much anything. Yeah. I say that while I'm sitting drinking a nice raspberry sour ale. So you know, I picked up the kids, so the beer stopped.
You got to do it sometime.
Let's move on.
The chart situation right now might not be as exciting as we are on the topic, but
not looking too good on the chart side, Rob. It's broke down a big support zone here around 30 cents, and it actually made new all-time lows in today's trading at 26 cents. I would say, though, that this company is one to look at more fundamentally, just given what Chris and Galen have said. On the whole microdosing thing, I started microdosing, and it's just, it was like my first time. Not really doing it consistently because I'm lazy at sometimes. I'm lazy at keeping up to the schedule, but I agree. You know, I think that's where things are going, and I know a lot of people who are into markets and other things just doing it, not necessarily. How can I say this in a nice way? But not necessarily for like health issues or whatnot, but more about
getting
the
high,
productivity, the focus. I guess you can sort of overdose on that, but you'd have to take like 6 or 7 or 8 microdose pills in a row. But usually it's just 2 a day, and I felt a difference. You're always quite positive. You're quite happy, and I guess in the future,
I've never giggled more than when I was on mushrooms.
There we go. Yeah, exactly. And
do it with somebody you like.
yeah,
say that again.
Do it with a group of
somebody
people.
you like a lot.
Yeah.
Do it with a group. Yeah. Got to do that. But as Chris and Galen were mentioning about microdosing and stuff, maybe in the future it's about consumer trends and organic and natural psilocybin. So I think approach this one more from a fundamental perspective. It is looking cheap. You can maybe pick up some shares here, 25 cents perhaps. What I would do is personally, I would just look at the psychedelic sector overall. So you can see here the PSIL psychedelics ETF had a pretty bad red day today here as well. And then there's also Psych as well. I believe that's the one, Horizon, and PSYK. And that's also having a bit of a red day. So if I was going to strategically enter the Filament, I would maybe just watch for some sort of action and bottoming in the overall psychedelic sector.
So are you spending any of my money, Michelle, right now?
I'm going to sit on the sidelines on this one, but as I said, I think long term is what you want to focus on, and that's where I think Chris and Galen have won over me on psychedelics here.
All right. Well, they get to go next on deciding on whether they're spending money right now too, Chris. You're muted again, kitty cat.
I'm looking at that chart over the next few days and weeks and just sort of figuring where it's headed. I don't like jumping in on something just as it's dropping. I'd like to see a little bit of a bottom out and maybe a little bit of interest come back into it. I like it at this price, but I think I can maybe probably find it at 22, 21 if things continue on in the current trajectory. It's definitely on the watch list for me. I think of the 200 or so companies that want to be psychedelics companies, I'd put this in with the dozen or so that seem to be actually doing real business. and that's an important separator. I'd also be very conscious of the fact that, like there's really no cannabis sector, there's pharmaceutical sector, and there's recreational cannabis sector, and there's cannabis byproduct sectors, and there's retail sectors. There's no real psychedelic sector right now. There's just companies that touch on that space. Of the companies that are really interesting, they're the biotech companies. And I think I characterize this as being one of those. This is a biotech company that's touching on the psychedelic space rather than a psychedelics company. They're not coming out with like labels that are all funky, getting yourself high, 1960s vibe. They're very grown up companies that see a medicinal use and are trying to move towards the place where they can actively participate in that market. I like it at this price. Keep an eye on it. Grab a bargain in the next week or two.
All right. I like that. And by the way, what'd you do with your cat that had been making noise?
It's still flying. I think it's about to land.
Oh, so it's your wife's cat. Okay. Hey, Galen?
Yeah.
We've got people kind of holding off and waiting and seeing at two various degrees of time. What about use?
Chris has a good point. The whole space itself is entirely embryonic. There's really no way to tell where it's going to land. There's a lot of players out there. That's the other thing. And until the rubber actually starts hitting the road, and there's not a lot that some of the companies can do about it because they're waiting for these regulatory initiatives to take effect. But until that really happens, there's no way to really know. At this point, it's kind of speculative. You're going to be putting your money on somebody you think is going to do okay over the next while for valuation, but until they actually start producing and selling, that's when the actual real meat happens. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to drop any money now. I am impressed with Filament Health because it's not coming out with the Keep On Truckin' t-shirt saying, let's get high and start doing Grateful Dead tours, right? It's actually trying to achieve some legitimacy within the marketplace, because I think to focus on recreational right now is a bit of a pie in the sky, and also probably shows a little bit of that you're not really thinking rationally about the marketplace. It's much more about business right now and establishing a footprint. So I'm going to see where Filament goes. It's got to level out for me before I start putting money in.
All right, folks, there it is. A whole lot of information on the old Filament Health FH on the NEO exchange under CEO Ben Lightburn. Do your own research. Make sure you do educate yourselves, because we can't guarantee anything. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Pleasure to be here, however. For Galen and Vishal and Chris, I'm
Try
Ron.
mushrooms, try mushrooms, try mushrooms.
You're
Sorry.
such a bad influence.
Oops,
There you
was
go.
that me?
I don't know who said that's a bad influence. It might be a good influence.
Well, no, good
Great
point.
influence.
We'll see you next time on the Equity Guru Investor Roundtable.